Amazing. And then Anne, you can kick us off whenever you're ready.
Okay, so hello everyone. Welcome to Project Red's discussion on Indigenous disparities in cardiovascular health. So for those of you who don't know, Project Red is an annual fashion show at Queen's University that raises money for the Heart and Stroke Foundation. This year, we're hoping to bring more awareness to inequities in cardiovascular research and disease prevention through initiatives like this one, where we hope to bring students and Queen's community members into conversation with experts in Indigenous health. So earlier last week, we spoke to Vanessa Nevin, the Director of Health at the Atlantic Policy Congress of First Nations Secretariat. At this session, we'll be talking to Lyndon Linklater, who's here with us, and he is a traditional knowledge keeper and storyteller. I'll introduce myself as well. My name is Anne, and I will be one of the facilitators for this discussion. I use she, her pronouns, and I'm a Chinese-Canadian settler currently living and studying on Cataraqui, also known as Kingston.
And I'm Natalie, and I use she, her pronouns. And I'm a white settler currently studying in Cataraqui, also known as Kingston. So before we continue our discussion, we'd also like to take a moment to respectfully acknowledge the traditional territories we are standing on. Queen's University and Project Red gratefully operates on the traditional homeland of the Algonquin, Anishinaabe, Haudenosaunee, and Huron-Wendat. During our discussion on cardiovascular health inequities during this discussion today, we want to recognize the role that colonization, racism, and cultural genocide played in shaping the health of Indigenous peoples. These acts of discrimination were enabled by many institutions in our society, including the groups we are engaged with as a club, such as universities, the healthcare system, and even the fashion and creative industries. As we strive to move forward and act upon the Truth and Reconciliation Committee's calls to action, we hope to promote dialogue and reflection about the state of Indigenous health in so-called Canada and what more needs to be done to build a more inclusive, representative, and reciprocal relationship.
We also want to let you know that today's panel may involve discussions of topics such as colonialism, racism, trauma, and medical discrimination. Project Red recognizes that these topics may be challenging to talk about, and we're grateful to our attendees and discussion participants for being willing to share their thoughts and stories. We encourage everyone listening or viewing this discussion to take care of themselves and to log off or take breaks if needed.
So we'll just start by introducing our guest, Lyndon Linklater, who is a traditional knowledge keeper and storyteller. He is a citizen of the Thunderchild First Nation in Treaty 6 and has roots in Couchiching First Nation in Treaty 3. Presently, he is also a member of the Heart and Stroke Foundation's Council on Health Reconciliation, providing guidance and expertise to direct the Foundation's work to advance truth and reconciliation in Canada and meet health gaps that Indigenous people face. Lyndon, if you'd like to introduce yourself a little bit further.
Well, hi there, everyone. Me too. I want to start off by, in my language, so what I just said was, my dear friends, all my relations, in the sense that we are all in this interview together and kind of learning about the same topic within the context of heart and stroke and health and wellness. So in that sense, we're related. So I call you my relatives. I shake hands with all of you. And that's what I said in the language. And I too, I want to acknowledge where I'm zooming in from. I'm at my residence just on the outskirts of Saskatoon, Saskatchewan, which is part of Treaty 6 territory. And I want to acknowledge the First Nations, the predominant First Nations that live in our province. And I want to acknowledge them in their respective languages. So we have the Nehiwak, Nehidawak, Nehinawak. Those are all Cree. And I want to acknowledge the Anishinaabe Nakaway, or in English, they're called Soto. I want to acknowledge the Dene people who are in the northern part of our province. And as well as on the prairies, the Dakota, Nakota, and Lakota peoples. And of course, I want to acknowledge our relatives, the Métis people as well, Saskatchewan Métis Nation, and acknowledge this beautiful land that I live on, and acknowledge our ancestors, all of our ancestors who partook in various treaties to acquire the right to live on these lands in prosperity with one another. Anyways, I want to get that to share that. As mentioned, on my late father's side, we come from Treaty 3 territory, which is now known as Northwestern Ontario. Couchiching First Nation, which is right next door to a town called Fort Frances, Ontario. So I acknowledge my Anishinaabe roots. And then on my mom's side, we come from Treaty 6 here, Thunderchild Cree First Nation. We are Nehiyawak peoples, and I grew up in northwestern Ontario. Moved to Thunder Bay when I was about 5 years old or so, and went to kindergarten to grade 6 to grade 9 to grade 12. Went to college in Thunder Bay, and then I traveled to Saskatoon, where I've been living here close about over 40 years. I went to university in '83 and been out here pretty much ever since. So I've mainly worked in the area of what is referred to as Indian government, First Nations, tribal councils. Um, our political provincial organization is called the FSIN, which stands for the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations. It represents 74 different First Nations in the province. And so I worked for those levels of government for close to 25 years or so. And the last probably 9 years or so, I've been kind of doing my own, kind of call it consulting work, working in the area of truth and reconciliation, helping institutions, agencies, um, organizations on their road to truth and reconciliation. So, as far as I can explain to you, that's a little bit about me. I too, as mentioned in my introduction there, I'm known as what's called a knowledge keeper. Growing up as I guess a young teenager, I began to develop a vast curiosity about my ancestors. Like, how did they do it? How did they live in minus 52-degree weather with the wind chill, like with no electricity? Like, how did they do that? Year in, year out, you know? And they lived for thousands and thousands of years off the land. And that fascinated me. So I became very inquisitive and curious. And in my educational, learnings, high school, college, university, I met these wonderful, beautiful people. In English, they're known as elders. And these elders began to teach me about the history of our people. They started to teach me about the culture, the traditions, the language, and especially in university, they really took me under their wing and basically began to train me. I kind of make a joke about it. It's like I met this guy, he's like Yoda, and I was like a young Jedi Knight, and he trained me the ways of the Force. So fast forward to today, Indigenous people, First Nation people my age, they don't know how to put up a teepee. They don't know how to build ceremonial lodges. They don't know how to conduct a traditional ceremony because they were never taught. You know, they don't know various sacred plants and their uses. You know, and how to make things traditionally speaking. Anyways, I was so curious that growing up, and I learned these things. And so, anyways, that's why I'm called a knowledge keeper. And today I find myself trying as much as possible to transmit this unique knowledge to the younger generations. Because as we all know, learning about those residential schools, they tried very, very hard to erase us from existence, our culture, our language, our traditions. And it's up to us as First Nations people, Indigenous peoples to keep our cultures alive. So it's imperative that we teach the younger generations all that we can with respect to our languages, our customs, traditions, and ceremonies. So that's kind of the work that I find myself doing.
Okay, thank you so much, Mr. Linklater, for all of that information about yourself and your background. It was very powerful to hear about how you came to where you are today.
We're now going to just move on to the questions, if it's all right with you. So as Anne mentioned, this is sort of a mix of prepared and student-submitted questions. We put an inquiry out on our Instagram to see if anyone had questions, so we sort of mixed those up with some questions we had ourselves. So our first question for you today is, in your view, what do you think the cardiovascular health inequities that Indigenous communities face today stem from? And then we also just have the question up on the screen if you need to reference.
Well, without a doubt, it all stems from colonization. It stems from loss of culture, loss of identity. If you can understand, if people can understand, once upon a time, we were so healthy as people living on what we refer to as a turtle island. In other words, the continent of North America. But in our languages, we call that Turtle Island. There was no such thing as diabetes once upon a time. There was no such thing as a heart and stroke demographics the way we have them today. There was no such thing as poverty. Like, it was so different, our cultures and how we lived as people. However, with the coming of the Europeans, and over time, our culture dramatically changed. As also combined with the government creating laws such as the Indian Act that basically imprisoned us on our own lands. And also with the impacts of those residential schools, as I mentioned earlier, the loss of culture, the loss of I can't tell you enough how much culture is so important. As well, our diets were severely impacted for thousands and thousands of years here on the prairies. We live off the bison, or as we've been taught to call them, buffalo. We lived off the buffalo for thousands of years. Today, the buffalo, well, at once upon in history, the buffalo almost became extinct. So our food source that we've been living for thousands and thousands of years is now gone. And they put us on Indian reservations, and they keep us there. And then they got this thing now called pop and chips and Kentucky Fried Chicken and like fast food, like it just so different from what we'd been used to for thousands and thousands of years. So with that different diet comes all these health conditions that we now face. In Canada here, type 2 diabetes is rampant in many First Nation communities. And this is a reason why too, higher statistics or demographics with respect to heart and stroke, the buildup of cholesterol because of what we put into our bodies, because of what we eat. So without a doubt, it's those changes that have occurred, over the last, just even say 100 years, and they've had tremendous impacts with us. And then with the loss of culture, like it's just amazing. As an Indigenous person, we know the difference living with culture, like a traditional culture. I'm calling, and I on purpose I'm wearing what's known as a ribbon shirt, in my culture. And I'm very proud to be Indigenous, and this is something that's coming back to many Indigenous, especially the younger people, because of what those schools did to our people, those residential schools. They basically brainwashed us, or like our parents, our grandparents, great grandparents, to reject our traditional culture, to become assimilated, I guess you could say. So anyways, with all these different components all together, that's why there's such a great difference when we talk about demographics with respect to Indigenous peoples. Our numbers are like skyrocket compared to that of the dominant culture. Like, and I'm sure if the students don't know this, I'm sure some of you may have heard this. Like when we talk about health statistics in general, First Nation people do not live as long as regular Canadians do. Like we have shorter lifespans, and it's like scientifically documented. And a lot of this, it's kind of hard to understand that the loss of culture could have something to do with this. But if you're asking me as an expert, like that's what I'll tell you. That's what it has to do with loss of language, loss of culture, loss of identity, and what we refer to as intergenerational trauma. Those residential schools, that's exactly what they did. We all know that you can get cancer from smoking cigarettes, that it's scientifically proven. Science can also prove that you can get cancer from cigarette smoke even if you don't smoke. And that's referred to as secondhand smoke. So, along that way of thinking, I hope people can understand there's such a thing called secondhand residential school. So, in other words, you didn't even have to have went in order to be affected by it. So this is what intergenerational trauma is all about. So that's how I would answer that first question. I hope it makes sense.
It absolutely does. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. You have a lot of really great insights in there. I'll give the second question that we have. So this one is asking, what role does health education and promotion play in preventing cardiovascular diseases within communities? And these can be Indigenous or non-Indigenous communities. As we know, like health education and promotion, it's one of the things we're doing right now, and it's also a big part of the Heart and Strokes goals. So what kind of, I guess, role do you see it playing?
Oh, without a doubt, it's monumental. And I encourage you in the roles that you play to keep doing what you're doing. By all means, that's the ticket. That's the answer, is educating, especially the younger people, to inform them, to educate them about healthy eating, healthy living, healthy dieting, healthy exercise. You know, it's so important to do that. However, I make the point that in terms of Indigenous people, and not just Indigenous people, but newcomers too, for example, the education has to be culturally relevant, and it has to make sense culturally speaking. So, um, and again, culture is so amazing. Like it truly is. On a First Nation, for just to give you a little example, on a First Nation, when we have a death in our community, we'll have a wake, we'll have a funeral. Many times when a wake or a funeral is going on, the band office closes, like there's nobody there. And so if you phone the First Nation on one of these days, the phone's just going to ring and ring and ring and ring, and no one will answer it. And whereas us in the city, we live in the dominant culture. There's people, if there's a funeral or a death, business still goes on, so to speak. Someone will answer the phone, and someone will take a message. But anyways, that's a culture. That's an example that talks about culture there. So in the First Nation community, that's how things are. So, if you were trying to contact someone at the band office that day or the next or for 2 days, and like no one's answering, like people will think these people don't pick up the phone, right? Like because they don't understand. So, anyways, and there's many other examples of examples about cultural differences, and there's reasons for that too. In our First Nation communities, often we're so close knit, we're related, or else we grew up with them, like we know them. And in our culture, it's a very important sign of respect to attend the wake, to attend the funeral. And from a traditional Indigenous perspective, cultural perspective, respect is a very high value in our culture. It's a very dominant value to respect people, to respect others. So in times of grieving, in times of loss, you'll go and support the family, and you'll go spend time there. And so anyway, like that's just an example, and that's a cultural difference. So these programs that when we talk about health promotion and health education, they need to be culturally relevant, and they need to make sense, from a cultural perspective. And this is where it helps to have someone who understands the culture, who can act as a liaison or a bridge to bring that information in an understandable way to the community. And so that's what how I would answer that question.
Amazing. Thank you for that answer. I really appreciate what you were saying about the cultural relevance in education. I'm in the education program at Queen's, and we definitely talk about that in my courses, but it's very impactful hearing it from you. So our third question for tonight is what changes must be made to our healthcare system to advance Indigenous cardiovascular health and overall well-being?
Well, again, in terms of culture, especially with the older people, language is very important. And for of the older generation of First Nations peoples, especially in my experience, the farther north that they come, the more likelihood their first language will be an Indigenous language. So, as healthcare professionals, whether doctors or nurses, or whatever, could be even ambulance attendants or whoever, and it's so difficult, though, so challenging, but sometimes um you can meet someone who's able to speak the language and to talk to an individual in their language that they can understand. Makes a really huge difference. So that's very important. And again, those cultural differences, again, they can really increase the likelihood of success in terms of educating, in terms of preventing, in terms of getting that understanding. So uh, I know it seems so easy of an answer, like it seems like every answer I'm going to give you is culture, language, and traditions, but it makes so much sense. It really, really does. And until you can learn, like truly learn as non-Indigenous people, to learn about cultural differences, and the best way to do that is to visit somebody who's like Indigenous, get to know them, go to their house, go to their community, learn their humor, learn their traditions, ceremonies. The more you can immerse yourself into the culture, the more you'll be able to understand, and um, you'll be able to communicate from both cultures, so to speak. And this is a skill that I have. It's not just me, but there's many of us out there. Like, we are formally educated, like we have a university, degree. We've been in the workforce. We have credit cards. We fly in airplanes. We go to hotels. We travel to Europe. But at the same time, like, we know our languages, we know our traditions, we know our humor, and it just makes a huge difference. But anyone can learn these, and that's how you do it, is by visiting, by getting to know somebody. And the more you can do that, yeah, it'll just add to your own repertoire, it'll add to your own resume, and you'll be able to cross those cultural bridges as they come. So that's how I'd answer that one.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that. I really do agree with you about this point about, like culture being super essential to healthcare and to well-being. It was a point that Vanessa and Nevin touched on a lot as well. I have another question for you. So this one is, what role do Indigenous healing practices play in addressing cardiovascular health disparities?
Oh, again, without a doubt, they can play a very huge, important, and successful role. How I wish you could come to Saskatoon one day, and I would invite you to come to a sweat lodge ceremony. I would bring you to our sweat lodge, and you would participate in what is known as a sweat lodge ceremony. As fast as I can explain it to you, it's like going to a sauna or a steam bath, but it's a very, very unique experience. It's also like very like intimate. It's deeply spiritual, and in see from our culture, how we think as First Nation people, there's four components to every human being. You have your mind, you have your emotions, you have your body, and you have your spirit. And each one of those make you who you are as an individual. And throughout the whole universe, there's only one Natalie, there's only one Anne, there's only one Lyndon throughout the whole universe. And it's because of those four components that make us who we are, as people. So, in order to be healthy, in order to be well, you need to take care of each component of your being. You have to take care of your mind, your emotions, your body, and your spirit. And so, your mind, for example, how you can take care of your mind is you have to nourish it, you have to feed it. So, in other words, you need to learn, uh, get an education, learn another language, use your mind. I'm speaking to you from my iPhone right now. Can you believe that once upon a time somebody used their mind to create an iPhone? Like, it's amazing. Our minds are so powerful. We all have a mind, you see, but we have to balance our mind, not to go overboard. For example, our old people, our elders will see somebody, a student, always studying, read, 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 read. They'll say, put that book down, too much mind. See, it's like you can go overboard, right? So, anyways, that's how you take care of your mind, but you have to do it in a balanced way. Emotions, we all have emotions. We have to take care of our emotions. So we have positive emotions, we have negative emotions. I would sooner be happy than sad. I'd sooner be jolly than grumpy, and it's okay to be angry. We all get angry, but don't be angry all the time. It's no good for you. So we have these emotions, so we have to balance these emotions. The third one's our bodies. We have to take care of our bodies. So what that means is we need to eat healthy, we need to exercise, we need to get plenty of sleep and rest. And that's how we take care of our bodies. But as we all know, especially the older we get, you would get this. I used to have a 6-pack. Now I got a 1-pack. But as we get older, we have to take care of our bodies. And again, see, this is where type 2 diabetes comes into our communities because we're not taking care of our bodies. I am told that type 2 diabetes is 100% preventable. All you got to do is watch what you eat and exercise. That's all you got to do. Anyways, we've got to take care of our bodies. And fourthly, our spirits. We have to take care of our spirits. We have spiritual needs. And how we take care of our spirit, ceremonies. At every ceremony, there's fellowship, there's prayer, there's singing. You listen to somebody, talk, and they'll enlighten you with what they share. And often at ceremonies, when you're done, like you feel really good. So when we talk about the sweat lodge ceremony, that's a very powerful ceremony where all four of your components get nourishment. So when you go to a sweat lodge ceremony, it helps your mind, it helps your emotions, it helps your body, it helps your spirit. In that sweat lodge, like you literally sweat, and all of the toxins are removed from your skin, from the steam. Because we all have, toxins. We're not even aware. But anyways, like you get really physically cleaned, you get emotionally clean, mentally clean, and spiritually clean. But see, that's an example of just one ceremony. But the best way for you to understand about the sweat lodge ceremony is for you to actually participate in one. So, oh, how I wish you guys, if you ever come to Saskatoon, you look me up, and I'll take you to a sweat, and you'll be blown away. But you see, for some time now, Western science has started to recognize the benefits of our traditional ceremonies in terms of them being very therapeutic, in terms of them helping to increase health and wellness being, to help in terms of, lowering negative health illness, in cultures. So the thing about our traditional ceremonies, like they really, really work. Like it's amazing. They really work. So it's taken some time, but Western medicine is kind of coming around now, and they're starting to recognize, the benefits. So without a doubt, yeah, it plays a huge role. And to all, health practitioners in heart and stroke, by all means, I encourage you to learn as much as you can about Indigenous ways of knowing through ceremony, in terms of it being like very therapeutic and very healthy. We lived like this for thousands and thousands of years, and it worked, right? But then colonization came along, and we were we were viewed as a lower class, uh, primitive, uncivilized group of people, and our way was no good, and they tried to save us. And anyways, I'll just stop there, but I hope you catch my drift. But it's plays a huge role, and by all means, learn more about it. That's what I'd say.
Thank you for that answer. I'm interested by what you're saying about the sort of balance between those four aspects, because I think of when I think of cardiovascular health, it's easy to just associate it with physical health and body health, but it's beyond that, for sure. And I think that has to do a lot with what we're hoping to sort of inform students about today. So thank you for that answer. Our second last question for you is, as a non-Indigenous person, what can I do to support Indigenous communities near me?
So I'm sure you've heard of the 94 calls to action from the Truth and Reconciliation Commission. Um, Basically, what those calls to action are all about is it's inviting non-Indigenous people to learn about our history, like Canadian history, learn about Canada's history, learn about what happened to Indigenous people, First Nation, Métis, Inuit peoples. In order to understand the present, you have to learn about the past. And in order to plan for the future, you need to understand the present. So they're all related. And a very simple piece of advice, what I always give advice to non-Indigenous people when they ask, what can I do as a Canadian to support Indigenous people. What can I do as a Canadian to support the 94 calls to action? The simple advice I give, whatever those residential schools were all about, do the complete opposite. So, in other words, help us reacquire our traditions, help us reacquire our languages, support us in whatever we do as a people, to get back what they tried to so hard to take from us. Um, Come stand with us, walk with us, join us in our traditional ceremonies. Yeah, don't be afraid, and learn. Visit, as I mentioned earlier, like visit, and like we do have what we refer to as protocols in our traditional ceremonies. So there's some things you'll do or you shouldn't do, and to be made aware of those protocol issues. But by all means, like they're not that bad. It's just something to learn about. There's a movie on, I don't know, on cable or satellite. It's called What Not to Wear. So kind of along that line, sometimes at our ceremonies, there's things like you shouldn't wear, and it goes against the traditional or protocol. But these are some of the things you'll learn about. But anyways, the more you learn, yeah, the more you'll fit right in, and you'll feel so you belong with everybody. Um, but anyways, that would be my advice for that.
Thank you so much for that response. And yeah, I completely agree. I think that element of connection and learning to really get to know another person or another group, another culture, can be so, so important in fostering those bonds. So our final question for you today is, have you ever witnessed the impacts of colonialism on the health of yourself or those in your community? And just to let you know, like there's no pressure to go into detail or anything. It's just whatever you're comfortable with stating.
Well, certainly, I've witnessed personally witnessed myself as well as other like loved ones. Um, you know, as we as I'm sure we've heard and read in the newspaper, there have been some negative cases that have occurred over the years with respect to like racism, in the hospitals, where doctors and nurses, have been found to do something that is against their profession in terms of their taking their oath, so to speak. And it does have something to do with like racism, and that, like that's just a reality. Um, However, like to share a really, really quick story. Um, my teacher, one of the elders who taught me the Yoda character that I mentioned earlier, um, he was a diabetic, and it just so happened this one summer we were having a sweat lodge ceremony, and just for if you don't know what a sweat lodge ceremony is, we heat stones in a fire until they're like really, really red hot, and then we carry those stones into this lodge, and this lodge is shaped like a igloo, and there's a hole in the ground, and that's where we place the stones. We carry them in with a pitchfork, and there's always a X amount number of stones. So in our sweat lodge, we always use 32 stones, and there's meaning and reasons why we use that number. There's reasons for everything, but I don't want to get into all the reasons, just to tell the story. So they carry in these stones, and anyways, we are having a sweat lodge ceremony this one summer afternoon, and it just so happened my teacher stepped on an ember as he was walking into the lodge, right between his baby toe and his fourth toe, right in the middle there. He didn't feel it, because as many people know, diabetics, they don't have any sensation or feeling in their feet, because of poor circulation. Anyways, he ended up stepping and he burnt himself and he didn't even know it. as things turned out, that got infected, and it got so bad he had to go see a doctor. And so when he went to see the doctor, he was complaining of his symptoms, and the doctor checked him out, and the doctor found a lump underneath his armpit and asked him, "Do you have any open sores on your body?" And he said, "I don't think so." "Well, let's have a look." So the doctor examined him, and all of a sudden the doctor found on the bottom of his foot was like infected. It was red, and because he's diabetic, poor circulation, like it can get very, very, very serious. So the doctor gave him some medication, told him to come and see him in a couple days. So sent him home. He took his medicine. He went to see him in a couple days. His foot was getting worse. It was getting to the point where the doctor was concerned if his foot doesn't heal, they might have to amputate, to prevent gangrene. And so he explained to him, he said, if we have to amputate, we're not just going to cut your toe off. We're not just going to cut your foot off. We're going to cut you below the knee. So it's very, very serious, he said. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give you the strongest antibiotic I can give you. And I'm going to send you to a podiatrist in Calgary, Alberta. And this is one of the best podiatrists in the country. And the podiatrist will make that determination whether or not they have to amputate. So you got like 5 days before you go to Calgary. So here's this medicine, take this medicine, and like it's very, very serious. So now my teacher, like he's really, really worried. And as he's about to leave the doctor's office, his doctor says, "Oh, by the way, one more thing." The doctor says to him, "I know that you Indigenous people, you have your own medicine people. Why don't you go ask one of your own medicine people to see if they can help you? Maybe they can help you. What have you got to lose other than your foot?" He says. So his my teacher was started nodding. Okay, so he started, asking around, and we have what's called the moccasin telegraph, as we kind of joke about it, or the smoke signal, to get information. And he learned about 3 or 4 different medicine people. Some were medicine men, some were medicine women. Anyways, he found one about 5 hours north of Saskatoon. So he went to go see this medicine man, and we have protocols, what we have to give this medicine person, in order to get the medicine. There's traditional protocols. Anyways, he followed all the protocols, and he told the medicine man, he showed the medicine man his foot. And so medicine man said, "I don't know if I can help you, but this is what I'm going to tell you what to do." So what he told him to do was to go to this certain tree, and he told him the name of the tree in the language, and he told him how it looked like, and he told him to take the bark off the tree. And what he said is, you cut that bark into pieces, and then what you do with some of the pieces is you make a tea out of it. And then after the tea cools off, what you do is you soak your foot in there. And then after you finish soaking your foot, then you take your foot out, and then you get some more of that bark and you put it on your sore, and you wrap up your foot, and you go to bed. And when you wake up, you do the same thing in the morning. So do that in the morning, do that in the night, do that for 4 days. That's what he told my teacher. So my teacher, he's really, really worried, right? Because like his foot is pretty bad. So he did what he was told. He did that for 4 days, and finally on the 5th day, he went to Calgary, and he went to go see the podiatrist. Podiatrist checked out his foot, and the podiatrist told him, "Your foot seems to be healing. We won't have to amputate." He says, "I don't know what you're doing, but whatever it is, keep doing it because it seems to be working. But listen," he says, "you're not out of the water yet. Um, you still could. It could take a turn for the worse. We don't know, but it looks good. But I can't sign off on it yet. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a referral for you. Where you live, there's a care home for old people where close to where you live, and it's run by the provincial government, and they have nurses there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make a referral for you to go see the nurse from Monday to Friday next week. You go see that nurse every morning, and what that nurse will do, she'll change your bandages. And on the Friday, she'll report to me and she'll tell me exactly. And that's when we can make the final decision whether or not we're gonna amputate or not. But whatever it is, keep doing what you're doing. It seems to be working. So he drove back home to Saskatchewan, and he was really happy and pleased. So he kept using that traditional medicine, right? And so, anyways, he starts going to see this nurse now. And many times my teacher, I don't know if he meant to teach me, but he was a great like storyteller. Like when we would visit, he'd tell me all these stories. And sometimes there'd be a moral to the story. Other times it's just like a story about nothing, and just to laugh and reminisce or whatever. But sometimes his stories had like deep, deep meaning, and they really taught me, about all sorts of different lifelong learning lessons. So he's telling me this story about his foot and about the medicine, and and I'm thinking, as he's telling me the story, I'm thinking, okay, I wonder what the moral of the story is. Like, where's he going with this? See? And so he's telling me the story about the medicine that he took and put on his foot, and then he started to tell me about this nurse. And he said to me, you know what, Lyndon? He says, I've never ever met a woman like this in my life. He said, this nurse is like amazing. She makes me laugh. She tells jokes. She has all these stories. He says, I can't wait to see her every morning. He says, when I go to bed, I'm already thinking about our visit we're going to have the next morning. And I got to meet this nurse 5 mornings in a row. And on the 5th morning, she told me, your foot is healing. Like, you're okay. You're not going to lose your foot. I'm going to phone the doctor. Like, you're okay. And so that was his story to me, right? And so I'm driving home now back to Saskatoon from where he lived. And I'm thinking about this story, like, what's the moral of the story, so to speak? For me, it had nothing to do with that traditional medicine, because like I already know it works. Like I've already experienced traditional healing, like from plants, and really remarkable stories, I could tell. But anyways, to me, that had nothing to do with the story. To me, it was this nurse. Imagine if all of us as people could be like that to each other. What kind of world would it be that we live in, I told that story at his funeral, at his funeral service. I was one of the ones to give the what do you call there, what's it called, eulogy. And anyways, and I people were crying, and he was amazing, amazing man. This guy, he's been gone now close to 20 years. Anyways, when everything was over and as I was leaving, I meet this woman. She says to me, I'm the nurse. So I hugged her and I thanked her, and anyways, there's a story there, about healthcare professionals, and it's a good story. So while there are negative stories in the media, there's also positive ones as well. Personally, I had a heart attack February 9th, 2020. It's coming up on my 4-year anniversary. 4 days from now, I had a heart attack, and ultimately I ended up getting 3 stents, put in my heart. And when I went to the emergency, and when I met all the nurses there, and I got transferred to the Royal University Hospital via ambulance. And when I got to the cardiac unit at the University Hospital, like within 20 minutes, I was on the operating table. And from what I personally experienced, I got like 110% care from everybody, from the staff at St. Paul's Hospital, the ambulance attendants, the staff at University Hospital. Like they went over and above, their duty, and how it made me feel. Like I felt that I was like famous, like like how I was like a rock star, how I got treated. So we do have there's good stories out there, but there's also negative ones as well. Just like everything, that's just how it is. But that's what we have to try to focus on are the good stories, and we do have a way to work in terms of removing and eradicating like racism, and hate, to eradicate hate. Like that's what we need to do. And the way to do it, of course, is through education and prevention and learning. Once we get to learn, and it's kind of such a corny answer, but as the Beatles would say, all you need is love. So that's how I'd answer that question.
Amazing. Thank you so much for that answer. I appreciate you sharing that story as well, because I think hearing stories like that, it gives an example to strive towards, especially in the healthcare fields, of embracing traditional healing practices. And clearly in that situation, it was really beneficial for your teacher. So that was our final question for you. Thank you so much for your time and participation. Anne and I appreciate it, and we're very excited to share this conversation with our community. And yeah, I found this very productive and very interesting. And thank you again for all of your insights.
Okay. Well, thanks so much. Have a wonderful evening, and I wish you all well in your careers. And
Thank you.
hopefully, if you ever do come to Saskatoon, come find me and I'll bring you to a sweat lodge ceremony.
Perfect.
Anybody, even your listeners who I don't see, but who are gonna watch this, yeah, uh, come to Saskatoon and hook up.
Sounds good. Amazing. Thank you so much again. It was nice to
Thank you
meet you.
so
Okay,
much. Yeah. Have a great rest of your evening.
sounds
All
good.
right.
You guys take care.
Of
Take care.
course.
Bye bye.
Okay,
Okay.
bye
Bye.
bye. Bye bye.